Okay.
Om. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvina Vaditamastu Mavidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May the divine being look
Look
over us
over us
lovingly
lovingly as a
as
mother and
mother and
father.
father. May the divine being support and nourish
Nourish
us
us
as a
as a
mother
mother
and
and
father.
father.
May we have the strength and skill to study
Study
together
together
the art
the
of
art of
spirituality.
spirituality.
May no
May no
misunderstandings
misunderstanding
arise amongst us. Om, peace, peace. Peace be
be
unto
unto
us and
us.
to all beloved beings everywhere. I'm very, very happy and delighted to introduce to you or say to you that we have as our guest speaker uh, this morning Dr. Loyd Allen. Uh, Elizabeth Yates, Jyoti, will introduce him, and I'm now going to absent myself until the end of the talk, at which time I'll return to do our uh, closing prayer. But see you later.
Thank you, Shankara. Good morning, everyone. You know, you always hear in these introductions people say, "It is with great pleasure that I introduce to you." And I want you to know that I mean that from the bottom of my heart. No longer is it, no, not only is it a pleasure, but it truly is a privilege to introduce to you someone very dear to me, Dr. Allen. He has been an invaluable spiritual guide for me in my life. He and both his wife Libby, who is also here, have just been very, very special for me in my spiritual growth, especially as a more of an intentional practice. You can read the wonderful things about Dr. Allen that we put on the website. He's the Sylvan Hills Professor of Baptist Heritage at Mercer. He teaches church history and spiritual formation, and he studied spirituality at Fordham University and Celtic spirituality, and serves as faculty for the Academy of Spiritual Formation and frequently leads pilgrimages to Ireland and Scotland. So I hope you'll be able to get back to that again soon, Loyd.
Me too.
But it is truly a privilege that I present to you Dr. Loyd Allen as our speaker this morning. Thank you, Loyd.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here with you again this morning. It says Dr. Allen on my screen here because that's what I put in for classes. But my first name is Loyd, and I welcome you to call me by anything that's non-derogatory that you please. So there's no formality for me about that title. In the prayer this morning, we heard that I hope that we are led deeper, I'm paraphrasing here, deeper into spirituality. I define spirituality in one way as the divine human encounter, and the results. So I make the assumption to begin with that there is a transcendent reality and that we humans encounter that transcendent reality. I think different approaches take different ways of thinking about or talking about that reality. So I have two or three motives this morning. And one of them is for us to do some thinking about, and maybe some talking about at the end, about why in our particular time and place that divine human encounter sometimes finds resistance. What peculiar kinds of resistance do we find in our time and place? That's a big, broad topic. And it's kind of the umbrella topic that I am most interested in speaking to you today. I intend to begin to explore that topic by going through a particular doorway. And that particular doorway is the Christian faith. I am a Christian, and so I find it helpful to explore this divine human encounter and some of the ways that it is made more difficult in our particular time and place in contemporary spirituality, big broad term, for Christians and therefore for all persons who are seeking divine human encounter. But because I'm going through the Christian doorway, I need to give some introduction at the beginning to the particular moment in the Christian faith's year today. Today is Palm Sunday, and tomorrow will begin what Christians observe as Holy Week. And Holy Week is that time from Jesus' entry into Jerusalem through next Sunday, which is Easter Sunday. And Easter Sunday is the central holiday or holy day of the Christian faith, as many of you already know. And what that holy day observes is the resurrection of Jesus. The resurrection of Jesus, in, again, just basic terms, is that Jesus died on the cross. He was killed by the state on the cross and was buried in a grave, in a tomb. And that on the third day, he rose from the tomb and appeared to his followers and others on earth in a transformed physical body. I say transformed because there are, in terms of the and all that we know about this, is told by believers. But those who gave witness, and those believers' witness is found in the scriptures, in the Gospels of the Christian Bible. And those believers experienced Jesus as a risen and transformed body. There was an embodiment to the risen Jesus. One little example of how that is expressed is that Jesus cooked on a fire, and some of his disciples who were fishing saw him on the seaside and came over to him, and he ate a piece of fish there and in another setting. And so part of the message or witness of the he ate a piece of fish is that he was embodied. He had a body in which he could take physical substance of a piece of fish. But it was not the same body. So there is much supernatural messaging in conversations about this most significant aspect of the Christian faith and Christian spirituality. The reason it is so important to the Christian faith, that is this resurrection event that Easter will celebrate, is that it was taken by those who experience this religious experience as confirmation that the divine had joined in a particular way with the flesh of Jesus. So incarnation means enfleshment, that the flesh became fully inhabited and expressed in the divine. And that this would have been so, the witness goes of the faith, that this would have been so before the resurrection, but it is the resurrection in which the body has died, but the body has been resurrected and given new life and transformed in the new Christian, in terms of the Christian witness of who Jesus was. So, and by the way, so Christians understand that humanity is given the opportunity, the potential, perhaps is best to say, the potential to also become transformed physically and spiritually, resurrected in a way that is a different sort of existence. Now, I don't care if you, in terms of my purposes today, I don't care if you believe any of that or not. I do care that you understand that's what the Christian witness is. And the Christian witness to that is predicated upon the witness of some individuals in the time of Jesus about 2,000 years ago. About 20 centuries ago, these witnesses experienced this event. Now, this is another significant part of talking about larger connections to the divine-human encounter in our contemporary day. That this witness through this witness, this language of these symbols of this reality of divine-human encounter, which I think is expressive of, not these symbols are expressive, but divine-human encounter is part of all religious experience. All religious experience, this divine-human encounter. And sometimes I would also argue, and you're going to see that coming later, sometimes I think it often occurs by persons who aren't religious at all, that they have a divine-human encounter. Now, coming through the doorway, divine-human encounter, through the resurrection, which is the central holiday, central witness, central event in Christian tradition. Easter really, really matters. And Easter is not, the event of Easter, which is Jesus' resurrection, is not understood to be outside of history. It is understood in the Christian faith to be part and parcel of the time and space in which we live as human beings, in history, to make it brief. So they are not like, this witness to the divine human encounter differs from the witness, for instance, of the Greek religion or the Roman religion of their time, which spoke of the gods, Zeus and others who lived on Mount Olympus. But that language of divine human encounter did not presuppose historical event, they did not assume that Zeus existed within historical time and space. Zeus was a way of talking about the reality, but Zeus and that reality were not connected to historical flow. Christianity differs from that way of talking about this, about this kind of spirituality, by saying these events, this type of understanding of divine human encounter is within the flow of history, within the flow of time and space and human history. Now, if you have spent much time around evangelical or other types of Christians, you may be bracing yourself for some 20 minutes or so of me trying to prove to you that is true. Or another way of saying it, of a Christian, especially one like I am, I'm a Baptist ordained minister, trying to prove to you that this is so, trying to convert you to this understanding of the nature of the divine human encounter. That is not my agenda. That is not what I am trying to do. So if you've had experience with that, past experience with that, it'll be hard for you, I expect, not to harbor certain suspicions about my agenda. I do affirm that divine human encounter perspective. That is how I approach, with all sincerity, how the divine has chosen to encounter us, and that is the way that I experience it. So I'm not backing off from being a follower of this way, of the Jesus way. But at the same time, it is not my purpose to try to win an argument or give a case that will win you to accepting intellectually or otherwise what I'm arguing here. But I'm entering through the Christian door to say, what does this great event in the Christian tradition, which will be celebrated wherever there are Christians, all Christians celebrate this Easter. And in some sense, they celebrate Easter as the resurrection of Jesus. What resistance, what obstacles are there to Christians in our time and space understanding the nature of this religious event of the resurrection? And I think in doing that, in pursuing that, I hope that I will open a larger window on how persons of any contemporary Western English-speaking group finds some resistance within them to these kinds of realities, this divine human encounter in our own time and place and experience. So, given that, I'm about to read you a central text from the Holy Book of Christians about this event. So I just want you to listen to it for a moment. It's 10 verses, and it's from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 28, 1 through 10. And what I want you to listen for as I read it to you is, I want you to listen for the places where something supernatural occurs. Listen for the text within here that give witness to some supernatural aspect or dimension. Okay, here we go. After the Sabbath, as the first day of the week was dawning, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to see the tomb. And suddenly there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord, descending from heaven, came and rolled back the stone and sat on it. There's a stone over the tomb that's rolled in front of the tomb. The angel came and rolled back the stone and sat on it. The angel's appearance was like lightning, and the angel's clothing white as snow. For fear of him, the guards had been placed in front of the tomb so that Jesus' body would not be stolen. And it was placed there by the government authorities. For fear of him, the guards shook and became like dead men. But the angel said to the women, "Do not be afraid. I know that you are looking for Jesus who was crucified. He is not here, for he has been raised. As he said, you come here, come, see the place where he lay. Then go quickly and tell his disciples, he has been raised from the dead. And indeed, he is going ahead of you to Galilee. There you will see him. This is my message to you. So the women left the tomb and quickly, with fear and great joy, ran to tell his disciples. Suddenly, Jesus met them and said, "Greetings." And they came to him, took hold of his feet, and worshiped him. Then Jesus said to them, "Do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee, and there they will see me." That is the end of this reading. I hope you noticed that these verses boil over with supernatural events. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary on the way to Jesus' tomb physically felt the earth move. They saw with their eyes the angel who caused the earthquake and rolled back the tombstone, sitting upon it. They could describe the aspect of the angel: lightning, bright with clothes, snow white, which not only the women saw, but the guards saw and collapsed as if they were dead. The women who kept their senses, the guards lose their senses, but the women who kept their senses, and I mean the five senses, those five senses heard the angel say Jesus was raised from the dead and left instructions for them to tell his disciples he'd see them in Galilee. And running to the angel's biddings, the women suddenly saw with their eyes Jesus, who said, "Hello." They heard his voice. They grasped his feet. So they felt through the sense of touch, they touched him. And then they heard him again repeat the angel's directives. All of those sense experiences of supernatural things are recorded in a mere 208 words in this most significant text of the Christian witness. All of those things tend to witness to things beyond nature. As a matter of fact, most of this text spends its words on things beyond nature. And I'll just go simply to Webster's dictionary and give you a definition of what it is beyond. If it is beyond nature, nature is, quote, the sum total of all things in time and space, the entire universe. So to understand what is being witnessed to or conveyed by these texts, by this text, is that it's suggesting that we attend to supernatural things. That would then be things that are beyond the sum total of all things in time and space, the entire universe. So we've already set up here a real conflict or a real paradox. For Matthew calls for attention to supernatural things, and he calls for attention to them through historical sense experience events. So I'm going to ask you a question. And by the way, this is a question that I ask my Christian students and fellow believers are taught these things are true. These things happened. This was really, if you'd been there, you'd have heard, you'd have seen, you'd have touched, you'd have felt the earthquake, you'd have felt Jesus' feet, you'd have seen all of this. Like you see the picture on the screen, like you hear my voice. Now, what I'm suggesting, where I'm headed here is how does their culture and our culture differ in about the way we can understand this expression of the divine human encounter, this spirituality? On Easter morning, Easter Sunday, ministers in our religion will get up and proclaim this event to their believers and the significance of this event. It doesn't matter to me what religion you are at this point in my presentation. If you got to sit in on Sunday morning at my church at Parkway Baptist Church or any other Christian church where they were proclaiming this event, would you believe it happened? I often begin teachings on spirituality among Christian communities by saying, do y'all believe in ghosts? Have you seen one? Have you touched one? By the way, I most often get a vast majority of my constituents who are hearing that question, do you believe in ghosts? And they say no. So it's a trick question because Christians proclaim the reality of the divine, of God, as a Trinitarian being who is Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. So if you don't believe in ghosts, I say, then you can't believe in God. At least not the Christian God. Now, that's a little different use of the word ghost. But that tension is what is set up. And what I'm trying to convey to you is it is right at the very center of the Christian witness to spirituality as a vital, divine human encounter. Now, the larger, I entered through that door. The larger question that I ask of you is, whatever your beliefs are, and if you have no belief at all in the transcendent, how do you understand spirituality as divine human encounter? By the way, if you're not a believer at all, you just say, it's all made up. I have had two dear neighbors. I have one of them is here now, the other is moved, who have just said to me, we really like you, Loyd. We're not Christians, we're atheists, because nobody could believe that stuff. But I believe you get some good approaches or motives out of it, so fine, you can be a Christian. But we don't need it because it just can't be true. So, don't you feel a little sorry for those preachers who are getting up there trying to say something about the essence of this divine human encounter kind of spirituality that is Christian, and it is their most central point, and it's really hard to believe. Why is it hard to believe? What is going on? I'm going to present several aspects of this. One of them is we have to understand the cultural setting of the people and time where this text was written. It's written in a time when the Jews were in exile and oppression by Rome, and many of the religious of the first century Jews believed that a Messiah would return, would come and free them from Roman oppression. What most of us don't know about that culture and time is that they believed that that Messiah would come from a community of martyred freedom fighters who are now disembodied spirits somewhere in God's hands. But from them, the Messiah, one of those disembodied spirits, would return to rule the kingdom of God on earth. And so they expected resurrection to occur at that time, and they believed it would be the end time. But their expectation was, this is a key point, Their expectation was that that return by one of those disembodied martyrs would always occur with an embodiment of that spirit. So the martyr in God's hands would become an embodied person on earth as their Messiah. So when the Christians are expressing what is happening with Jesus, whom they claim to be that Messiah, they don't think Jesus is a disembodied martyr, but they do think that Jesus, if he is the true Messiah, will be embodied, and that his embodiment will be the sign of the freedom of God's people from God's enemies. So the point culturally is, in their time, if Jesus is the Messiah, then he has a body. He's not a spirit. He's not a symbol. He is an embodied, resurrected person. And he is still Jesus. So kind of a bottom line way of saying that is, in their culture, this resurrection from the dead and the embodiment, continued embodiment, though transformed, of this resurrected person is essential. By the way, in saying that, I think I'm just making it harder and harder to believe there's a real message here that's connected to something that happened. This embodiment. Or in a sentence, the Christian tradition has long affirmed that the empty tomb is necessary. It matters. And the emptiness represents a transformed re-embodiment or embodiment. It's the same body. They could see the wounds. Embodiment of Jesus. Okay. Y'all still believe in ghosts? Or don't believe in ghosts? Or in your tradition, how do you connect embodiment, the real, and the spiritual? Are they, in any sense, united? The women, also, this is another one of those cultural issues. It says in that text that I read, the women took hold of his feet. Now, there are a lot of ways that persons have interpreted the meaning of that taking of that phrase, took hold of his feet. But here's one that has only been researched and brought up recently. And that is, there was a guy named Dale C. Allison Jr. He taught over at Duke University. And what he was interested in teaching and affirming was that these images that are given here convey meanings to their time and place they don't convey to us. Here is one. There are a number of interpreters throughout patristic and medieval history who saw the grabbing of the feet as a confirmation of Jesus' physicality, because in the literature of that time up through the Middle Ages, before the modern era, ghosts did not have feet. In descriptions of ghosts, they are always floating. They are never touching earth. So one way to know if it's a ghost you're seeing or some other kind of transcendent being is to see if they have feet and are their feet touching the ground. So when they grabbed his feet, the writer is trying to tell us, listen, I'm telling you, this was physical. This was real. Ghosts don't have feet. Jesus did. I could give you the footnote to the research that he's done on that. Now, by the way, none of that is me arguing or these authors I have quoted arguing that as proof of the resurrection, there's a difference between arguing that this text requires for acceptance a belief in a physical resurrection, and arguing that therefore I have proved that Jesus was physically resurrected. Those are two different issues. But I am arguing that the doorway into Christian spirituality argues for a physicality in the connection of the divine human experience. So here's what I propose, that what the guy who's doing the cultural work on the martyrs and the guy who's doing the cultural work out of Duke on the nature of discussions of physical beings and ghosts is that each of them leaves open, this is a crucial sentence for me, they leave open the possibility of authentic supernatural encounters in human experience, something that does not fit under the definition of natural or nature. Leaves open the possibility. Now, my next step in this is, in their time, that's not a problem. In their time, that is when this was written, and up until modern times, that was assumed that there was the possibility of genuine religious experience of that which was supernatural experience. Now, that is not true as we sit here this morning in our culture, in our larger culture, in the modern era, particularly in the Western world. In our time, reality is defined in terms of rational or rational scientific evidence. We exist on that assumption. The professions, business, medicine, law, psychology, higher education, all these disciplines can carry on quite easily without any reference to reality beyond nature. As a matter of fact, they struggle to find a way to integrate it, religious discussions, transcendent reality, with their discipline. Now, you can do it if you're in English literature, because you're not talking about real things, you're talking about imaginary things. And the imaginary things may move the mind, may move the heart, but they don't exist. By entering through the door of Christianity and talking about the strong insistence upon a reality that could be seen, heard, felt, touched, the conflict is made more acute. Now, folklorist and phenomenologist David J. Hufford has written that cultures have official belief systems. Cultures have official belief systems. And those official belief systems are promoted by authoritative social structures. I could spend another hour on talking about this folklorist and what he meant, but I'm going to repeat again. He says that you and I live in a culture which has an official belief system. By the way, any human being on the earth lives in a culture that has an official belief system. But those official belief systems differ And those official belief systems in any of those cultures, including ours, are promoted by, held in place by, larger authoritative social structures. Here's a summary of our modern official belief system. Our being English-speaking folks in the United States, and I know there's a lot of variety, English-speaking folks in the United States in 2021. Our official belief system excludes the supernatural from existence in the real world. It excludes the supernatural from existence in the real world. Go back to that Webster definition. What is natural is all that is in the universe. So by the way, if it's supernatural, it's not real in the universe. That is a starting point for our culture. And it's the starting point of modern culture. Now, it then sees religious experience. It sees spiritual experience, says Hufford. And it then translates them or transforms them to something else. It transforms them to psychological experience or to natural anomalies that have been mislabeled. The religious folks thought it was supernatural, but now we know that they misunderstood. So Jesus throws out the demon spirits in Christian perspective, and we say, but that was really epilepsy. You see what I'm doing? You transmute the religious experience automatically because of the cultural view into something else. And that these anomalies, these natural anomalies, these things that are odd, that have to be translated, they are usually mistakenly labeled with religious language. And that's why religion exists. Any religion. It's just a way of misnaming things that are really natural, not supernatural at all. Now, by the way, you wouldn't have to do that, the Christian view of resurrection being physical. You could do whatever religious experience you might express yourself as having if you were of another religion, Buddhist religion, Hindu religion. If you then began to talk about your divine human encounter, this culture would automatically transpose that to something else, not a supernatural thing. This is an increasing secularization. And we live in the modern era. I know about postmodernism, but we live in a modern era, most of us still, not postmodern, most of us, and most of our religions. We live in an era that suppresses, ignores, or explains away supernatural experience as some sort of fiction, as some sort of not real. Now, by the way, if you are trying to promote spiritual experiences as real in human life, as a minister or as a shaman or as a layperson who's had some, it poses a problem. It poses a problem especially for institutions that are rooted in supernatural realities. Now I'm going to posit, I'm not trying to make an argument. I'm going to posit that my Parkway Baptist Church is such an institution. It is an institution rooted in supernatural event. I just spent 20, 30 minutes talking about the supernatural event of the resurrection in which all Christian institutions are rooted. I would guess that the Vedanta Center is also rooted in a very different way in trying to say these religious experiences or supernatural or divine human encounters. Go back to just the word spirituality. These events are real. They are not unreal. They are not something else. A rising postmodern culture might pose different challenges, but I'm not talking about them. It may open new perspectives. We may be in that shift. But most professional Christian ministers who are going to preach on Sunday to their people, and they hope that their people benefit from their explanation of the text I read to you, and yet they exist in daily practice, and they have been educated in a system that declares our world a supernatural free zone for all intents and purposes. I know I'm preaching to the choir, because why would you go to the Vedanta Center on Sunday morning at 11 if you believed that we needed only supernatural free zones? But the problem is, how then do you talk about these supernatural events? I want to give you some examples of how most religious leaders have to talk about them in our day and time. They have to say that I'm going to tiptoe around the historical circumstances that have been expressed in my doorway of Christianity this morning. So just to use that as an event, a historical event, when I'm trying to unpack that event for persons, for the benefit of their spirituality, I'm probably going to have to tiptoe around the possibility of angels. I'm probably going to tiptoe around that there might be a crucified man who had a transformed embodiment. So how do I tiptoe around it? Well, I would probably say to myself, and I might express it, but when I'm explaining my faith to you, I might be trying to say, you know, all the reality of this supernatural stuff is purely interior. It's psychological. It's only subjective. So what's really important in hearing it is that we deal with the fear we have within ourselves and of the joy that can come to us if there were hope beyond this life or this reality. That's one way to do it. Just make it a psychological expression. Do you see me transposing? I earlier said we have to I'm transposing when I do that. At worst, religious authorities like myself may explain away these claims to external sources as interior reactions that are unhealthy. It was a delusion they had. These people had an hallucination of a sort. Today, if I came to you and said, I had that kind of experience, I hope you would get someone to check out and see if I were having a psychotic break. Now, I can put both those two together. I can say, so what we have here is a group of women who had a psychotic break, some sort of mass psychosis. But if we look at how that psychosis changed them, then we can see that it was positive for them. But don't believe that it really happened, because it can't happen. So none of that critique, by the way, satisfies what at least the women and their community gave witness to. Hufford has some really interesting research that shows that if you are in a culture that believes that the universe includes genuine religious experience by human beings of supernatural realities. Then he tested in those cultures, I'll just give an example, tribal people who believe that the gods speak to them through dreams. So that they then believe you ought to listen to every dream because that's the spirit speaking to you and you have a direct doorway through your dreams. So if you're in a culture that holds that one, then he started doing research. His research is how often do people in those cultures have religious experiences? And he got statistics for that across some global studies. Now, by the way, I want you to give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down to this question. Then he did studies in our culture, our modern cultures, which he says have that larger setting in which the supernatural is not real. Do you think that our people who held that had more religious experiences that they reported or less religious experiences that they reported? Give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. The answer is about the same. People in our culture, when asked in individual phenomenological research, if they've had these kinds of experiences, they have about the same number of them as persons in cultures which openly speak about them. So, what does that mean for us? By the way, if I had time, and I don't because I'm at 11:52, if I had time, I'd give y'all an opportunity to tell me about the supernatural experiences you've had. I'll give you one. My wife and I were trying to adopt a child 32 years ago. All we knew was that there was a woman who was pregnant and she was considering several families and she'd have a child sometime in the spring and we might be the couple that she calls. We didn't know who she was. We didn't know anything about her. We were doing all communication through our lawyer. Libby, who's on here, had a couple of dreams about that event, about the baby. I had not. I woke up one morning about 7 o'clock, lying in bed, and I turned to Libby and I said, I had my first dream about the baby. She said, what'd you dream? I said, I dreamed the lawyer called us. And he said the baby was born and it was a blue-eyed, blonde-haired little girl. And that there was a catch. We had been chosen as a couple, but we had to go up north and pick her up within 24 hours or it was going to another couple, or the baby was going to another couple. Libby laughed and said, yeah, like we could get that done in 24 hours. And then about 9 o'clock that morning, that was 7, 9 o'clock that morning, what happened to me? What happened to us? We got a telephone call. Came from the lawyer. He said the baby's been born. We didn't know when the due date was. She's a little blue-eyed, blonde-haired baby girl. But there's a catch. You got to come pick her up within 24 hours or she's going to choose another couple. Okay. I've told that to my friends. I told it to some close friends recently. Both of them said, that's a coincidence, Loyd. That's just a coincidence. Or you are misremembering things. It didn't really happen that way. I could get more stories like that from you. By the way, I could get more stories like that from people off the street, randomly. What does it mean then for divine human encounter in our culture? How can we think about this that is so in denial? One of the tasks of people like me and you is to affirm not that we can prove those events are real. I cannot prove it was not a coincidence. Lord knows the human memory is sure faulty. Maybe I just misremember the whole thing. But I can, as a person who believes in genuine religious experience, I can at least leave open the possibility that those events occur, but that we tend to mislabel them. And if I can get that far, then I might have people who have eyes to hear, eyes to see, and ears to hear things that could be transposed in other ways, but may be affirmed as deeper realities. I'm going to close with something that I first encountered in a psychology paper, and another thing that I first encountered in C.S. Lewis. A psychology paper said, one of the experiments that has been tried and is that you took people, clients, and you're doing a psychological test, and you just flash up, today we do it on a screen, and you just flash up a set of 52 cards. Here's the King of Queens, Jack of Spades, Two of Hearts, Two of Clubs, and you get people to name them as you go through. What you don't tell them is, when you do this, the first part of this test, this research, is you don't tell them that you've changed some colors within that set of 52 cards. So maybe you changed the Two of Hearts and painted it black. And then you flash them up. People very, very, very seldom say Two of Hearts, but it's painted black. They say Two of Clubs or Two of Spades. However, if you do the same research again, and you tell the persons when they come into the experiment, we might change something in the nature of these cards. There might be a possibility that these cards are not like you've always seen them. Then when it pops up, they are much more likely, not everybody, but they're much more likely to say, I see it, Two of Hearts painted black. That's what I mean by perhaps our task as spiritual persons in this particular culture is to not try to prove that spirituality is real, because, by the way, you can't. If you could, you'd still be inside the rules of that culture. But to at least raise the possibility for people that there's a difference. Here's another way to talk about that difference, and it is my last event. And it is, C.S. Lewis, by the way, got this from a 19th century satirical novel called Flatland. Some of y'all may know Flatland, the novel, or the movies that came from it. And to talk about it, I'm going to share my screen. Oh, I can't share this screen. Who is the host? Elizabeth, are you the host?
Cindy is the host. She'll probably, it might take her a second to fix it.
Is she here?
Yes.
I'm here.
Cindy, can you share it so I can share the screen?
I'm trying to,
What you have to do is you have to open the share. No, you have to go down to participants. No, where is it? Where is it?
do you have a thing that says ask to share? Wait a second. Let me find
I got it. You got it. It's on. It's on. It worked.
Okay, good.
Whatever we did.
I changed something, so okay.
No, I think it was probably a religious event. That's what I thought. Spiritual event. So here's, and C.S. Lewis, who is a Christian apologist, used this in trying to describe the Trinity, but it works very well with what I'm trying to present today. He said, we all exist within certain dimensions. We live within a human dimension, within time and space. So and with the five senses. So all that we can affirm as real has to be done within that box. But what if supernatural events occurred in a dimension that we can't experience. So what Flatlander, and then Lewis picks it up for religious views, says, what Flatland picks up is, think of yourself and myself as a square. We are two-dimensional. We are drawn in 4 straight lines, and so everything we know is in 2 dimensions. That's our reality. What if there were, and that's the kind of beings we are. We are the squares. We live in Flatland is the title of the book. Now, what if there were another being which was not 2-dimensional, but was 3-dimensional? A being that was, say, a ball, or a ball-shaped being. And that being came down and contacted our reality. What would that ball look like to a square? Y'all go ahead and unmute and tell me what you think the answer to that is. It's right here on the picture, but tell me how you, what does the ball look like to the square?
It would look like a circle.
It looks like a flat circle. Now, there are flat circles in reality. But what if the flat circle, as it moved up and down, it changed shape from a bigger circle to a smaller circle, to a bigger circle to a smaller circle? That would look out of place to us. We would ask, how can a circle expand and subtract? By the way, and you can see the analogy here, it suggests that this is always what's happening to us when we promote the possibility that the expansion and the contraction that we are experiencing is not a coincidence. It's not a bad memory. That some angel, and by the way, that's how Lewis can use this. He can say, if an angel came down, what would it look like? Well, it looked like lightning, dressed in clothes. And so it looked like a person, but it wasn't a person. And there's just no way to describe it or share it in a way that is true to the reality of the cube, of the ball-shaped reality. To sum up, Christianity says that there was a religious event that occurred that those people testified to through their senses. And it wasn't just psychological. They weren't just trying to give symbols of what reality would be like if that had happened. They are trying to say, this thing came down here, and they are describing what it looks like as best they can. But you and I live, or work, most of us live, it's all generalizations, but we live in a culture where we think the possibility is that something like that, whether you're Christian or some religious experience, is possible. Otherwise, you could have no genuine religious experience. Otherwise, every religious experience you have is simply some psychological thing or some symbolic thing. There's no real transcendent. I knew a pastoral care professor who had a mystical experience. I've recently written about him. His name is Edward Thornton, now deceased. And he once said to me, I lived 20 years as a pastoral counselor thinking God was a really good concept to help people get psychologically straight. And then he was in a crisis illness in hospital, near death. And he didn't have a near-death experience, but he's in the hospital. So it's a mortal crisis. And he writes in his dream journal, I read his journal recently for the first time. He's been dead 20 years. And it said, light in the corner of the room subjective, but not me. Real. And he describes that way. And then later in his journal, and I knew this said true, I didn't know exactly what had happened. I just knew he'd had a mystical experience. Later in his writing, he says, so I spent the next 2 years in Freudian psychotherapy because I knew a Freudian would know pathology when he saw it. And he said, and it's never gone away. He said, everything has changed for me. And he said, I can't explain it to you, but I can tell you. You should believe it's possible because I know it happened to me. I hope that in sharing this with you today over a long, way long lecture, that you won't see me trying to defend Christianity. But my larger purpose here is to defend divine human encounter in general. And to say that our task as persons who pursue spirituality is to at least raise the witness to the possibility and to realize we are in a culture which is very resistant to that. And that's the modern world, which, by the way, is passing away, but it still holds a very strong grip on religion in our world. Okay, if you will all unmute. And if your brain is full and you need to go with my blessing. If you want to stay and talk about this a little bit, I have time to do that.
Dr. Allen?
Strike you. Yes. Yes.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. In the first place, your lecture came at a very timely moment of Easter.
Yeah.
We need to put a thought behind what we celebrate.
Yeah.
So that it's not a celebration without celebration. And you put many thoughts. And naturally, this leads to a lot of discussion, and I would have to be very succinct in my comment because I cannot tackle everything. But number one, yes, I do believe Jesus Christ existed. I do believe his body was mortally wounded and he died. I believe that his spirit came back. And the living proof of that one is that even 2000 years have gone back, we still talk about Jesus Christ. It's not because you are born in America and you have been introduced to a Christianity and therefore you believe in Christianity. Someone like Mahatma Gandhi,
Sure.
he went to London and he said, Christianity makes tremendous sense to me. And therefore, he wanted to be a Christian. But then he studied Christianity and also he studied Hinduism. Not Hinduism in the mythological sense,
Yeah.
but in pure metaphysical sense. And then he was appalled. And therefore, when he met Archbishop of Canterbury, who asked Mr. Gandhi, I understand you are trying to be a Christian. He says, sir, I'm trying to be a Christian, but I'm finding out it's so difficult to be a Christian. He says, are you Christian? That means to show that perhaps somewhere along the road, Jesus Christ came back, but not in his full form, because we do not let him. As a matter of fact, we have mortally wounded Jesus Christ right before our eyes in the last few years.
Yeah.
And then where is the point? But you can wound his body, you cannot wound his spirit. Yeah. Because that spirit is immortal. It is going to come back. Either it is going to come back in America or in Africa or some strange country, but that voice cannot be drowned. Which brings me to a thing what you call supernatural. I call it natural.
Yeah. Yeah. If you affirm that spiritual experience is real,
Yes.
then spiritual experience fits under or expands that Webster definition of natural. It means it is in the universe. However, even that is not quite accurate,
Exactly.
because we're not having with spiritual experience something that is part of the universe. We're having something that is extra universe.
Yes.
The Christian way of talking about that is creation is not God, but God is throughout creation and beyond creation. It is the beyond language that our culture cannot accept. And because it cannot accept the beyond language, it cannot believe that the beyond is present in the midst. And I think that's pretty basic to mystical experience in every religion or no religion, which is we experience something that is beyond all natural experience. It comes from some other place. We're flat. Everything is flat in our understanding, though we may not understand all the flatness, but there's even something else that comes from above. The above, the outside, transcendence itself. The word transcendence.
Yes.
Spiritual, not bodily.
But even the word culture is really a microbiological term in which the bacteria of the same kind, when they flock together, then it is called a culture. So culture is a very debatable word. And that culture is going to change, because now you can see all of a sudden, with tremendous of mobility that you see, we are going to create entirely a new culture. People are going to talk from different backgrounds. They are going to interchange, exchange, and find another truth, because each one realizes to see things with five senses is going to be enough, but not good enough. We have to go beyond it.
Thank you.
Hello, Dr. Allen. Oh, sorry. Do you want to go? Is Uma trying to go?
Go ahead.
I have a very short question. I think you touched upon this a lot, Dr. Allen. But given our scientific understanding in the modern day world, do you think we are further along in our understanding of supernatural phenomena, or do you think we are further back than we were during the time of Christ?
I think that science can assist the larger reality, capital R reality. I quoted two guys to you, one from Duke and the other guy is, I think he's from New Zealand, and their research. They are doing scientific research. They're doing, when he's doing that phenomenological, then he's doing double-blind survey stuff to see how many people have religious experience in the culture. That's helpful. The other guy from Duke, he's studying the nature of the descriptions of these experiences and where across cultures they tend to be the same. But he's doing scientific research. I think that's helpful to us. And I think it's helpful to the larger, and this is not the question you asked, but I'm not trying to do away with the Enlightenment. I'm going to go see my doctor. I'm going to take my pills. But that's not the question you're asking. Now, can any of that help me with my religious experience? It already has, because I have lived in a modern world for most of my life, in a culture in the world in my time. Not all cultures on the globe are like this, but a culture in which the understanding of religious experience was flatly denied. Now, they didn't say it didn't happen. Here's what they would tell me in school. And I'm talking about religious school, theological school. They will say that may or may not be true, but since you can't prove it, you can't use that in your paper. You can't use that in your theology. The only thing you can talk about in theology are those things which you can rationally, linearly argue for. So don't tell me about your dreams. That's got nothing to do. Give me your rational argument. But by reading more widely in scholarly work, which is modern science of a sort, or reading about the vastness of the universe or what dark matter might or might not be and all that, it has affirmed for me the possibility of a transcendent reality which I have been given experience of by the grace of God, by no gift of my own. So science has helped me there. Does it make me farther along than Jesus was? It gives me more ways to talk about it. And I realize I'm not giving you a direct answer because I don't have one for that.
No, thank you.
May I please, first of all, let me tell you how when you started, I thought that you are here because Easter is coming. And this is the appropriate time for someone like you. And I remember your earlier lecture about Fowler's stages of faith theory. So I was extremely interested. So I'm attending. And then when you started developing your thought, and one by one, I saw where you were going. Then I began to be really, genuinely interested. And to me, it's so fascinating the way you explained that in those times, supernatural, even without their knowing the word suppose, they truly believed in it. In our modern times, even though we may inside believe, because of a rational and scientific bent of mind, we will not like to accept it. But here is the catch. Vedanta, and I'm sure you know about it, that Vedanta, not today, but thousands and thousands of years ago, realized this truth, that there is something beyond our senses.
Something out there.
Yes, out there, beyond space and time. And there is not one universe, there are multiple universes. And I'm amazed at those insights of the rishis, of the old sages, that without any scientific proof, they could at least affirm that there is some reality beyond. But at the same time, they also put it that speech cannot hold thee, nor mind. Yet we cannot think without that, without you, without speech, without mind. So this is wonderfully done, I think, not because I belong to Vedanta. I believe in all religions, and there are aspects of each religion which are intertwined. And this is where I find it very fascinating that you brought it up, that there is something which is not beyond our conception, but at the same time, we feel it. The example you gave, I have several examples of how when I came through a life-threatening surgery, and whatever happened, I don't want to describe. but it made me convinced that there is some force which Martin Luther King said, that universe is working in your favor, or there is something that is said about justice is on the side of the universe. So things happen we cannot explain, but they are deeply, deeply, I think, possible.
Yeah.
That's what I think. And the second point I wanted to make, it's actually a question. If Jesus Christ, of course, experienced God, he was God for Christianity. But why didn't Christianity go deeper into these metaphysical questioning and aspects? Very few, like Meister Eckhart did.
Yeah.
Not all did. Why did Christianity, I would not say close doors, but why didn't it go as deep into it as Hinduism or Jainism or Vedanta did? That was my question.
Yeah. That's a big, broad question. The first thing that comes to my mind is that Christianity did go deeply into the mystical side. And if you look at the first 500 years or 600 years or 700 years, if you look at Eastern Orthodoxy, with its approach to faith primarily not through rational linear thought, that you will see now. So the question then comes back to me: why did Western Christianity not do that? And I think I have a better answer for just Western Christianity, because the Enlightenment and the modern changes that occurred from about 1650 forward to right now have caused us to lean towards a definition of reality that excludes that kind of mystical experience. That's what I meant by it tends to transpose it. The best it often does is say, well, it might be true, but there's no need of considering it because you can't prove it's true. I'll just leave it. It's no good to me. Don't read to me about the resurrection because I can't believe it actually happened. So therefore, it's no help to me. Give me only stuff I can understand. By understand, we mean that fits in flatland. Whereas the East didn't experience the Enlightenment in the same way. Now, by the way, there's some great advances that come from the Enlightenment that are human and godly, medicine, etc. I'm taking my vaccines. But at the same time, there's a loss. And there's a loss on that spiritual side. And I think a kind of intuitive realization of that is one of the reasons that so many Americans in the second half of the 20th century begin to turn towards what is generically described as Eastern religions, Hinduism, Buddhism.
Yes.
Thomas Merton, Catholic of the 20th century, turned towards Zen, but he didn't become a Zen Buddhist. He just said Christianity has a similarity here if we would just recognize it. I got one more part of that to say, and that is I am not arguing. I would not propose that all religions are alike. I don't think they are. I think all religions have experienced that cube coming down into the flatland.
Yes.
But we have taken different ways of appropriating that.
Right.
And that there are some are better than others. Some people have had a religious experience and decided they were the right ones and everybody else should be killed. That's also accepting the possibility of religious experience. We would say, no, they're denying the true religious experience, but they would say to us, no, you're. So we always have to be humble. So I affirm my belief that the universe is loving and is trying to help us all the time.
True. Yes.
I begin my mornings with, these are the first words of the prayer I use in the morning.
Yes. Yes.
O God of light, you are working all day long for good in the world.
Yes.
And it is about love.
Yes.
But I can't prove that. And I know other people that say, oh God of light, you're working all day long for good in the world. Help us to get rid of all the Muslims and those Buddhists and those Hindus who don't believe the truth, and let them join us. And I'm in recording, so I may be stepping on toes, and I am a guest in your setting. But I also know Hindus who say, well, it doesn't really matter what you believe because it's all the same. All religions are the same. They will all come towards peace. Well, maybe not. Maybe all religions aren't equally comprehending the nature of their religious experience, which should make all of us humble.
Yes.
And make none of us say, my way is the way. While at the same time, we must be committed to the truth as we understand it.
Exactly.
And we must compare how we understand this with how others understand it.
Right.
So Thomas Merton is saying, I'm Christian. I'm Thomas Merton. Merton says, I'm Christian. And I understand the embodiment of God in the incarnation to be essential to understanding divine human encounter. But he said, but I have found ways to experience that reality in Zen Buddhism that I didn't find in my own experience. And that most of my Christian fellows, he's talking about the Christian religion, don't have.
I think that's correct. And Mahatma Gandhi very nicely corrected. He said, not all religions are the same.
Right.
And they're not equal. But what he said at the same time, have equal respect for all religions. No one religion should claim monopoly, that I am the only one and all others are wrong. Each one has some core of truth.
Yes.
That it is, what you believe or not. So what he said was a respect for all religions, not that they were all same.
One Christian theologian, Niebuhr, is remembered, he's 20th century, for saying, all our belief is fragmentary.
Yes.
And some of us have different fragments. He didn't go on to say, and some fragments are closer to the whole than other fragments. And I also want to turn this back around and say, this is not just Pollyanna, if we just do religion, everything's going to be fine, as long as we're sincere. Within traditions, there are persons who are sincere Christians who are violent.
Oh, yeah.
And they are sincere, but I would argue they're not true Christians because they're violent. So I've taught at a Muslim university to Muslim clerics in training. And one of the questions they frequently ask me is, if America is Christian and Christian is for peace, then why is America so warlike? And one response I had to that was, well, there's some Muslims that were on the news on CNN that they were seeing over there in India at the time. I said, there's some Muslims who are very committed and they just cut the heads off a group of Christians in Egypt. So why do you call Islam so peaceful? And they said, oh, they aren't real Muslims. I said, exactly. Now, who gets to decide who real Muslims are?
Yeah.
And to just push it one step further, there are Christians being persecuted by nationalist Hindus in India today. Are they real Hindus? Have they got the message that Hinduism brings? I hope not.
Yes.
So there is, in this thing above us, we must always say, when we have these common religious experiences, what is their characteristic? I recognize it in my Muslim friends who are mystical, and I use that phrase
Yeah.
deliberately, Sufi kind of mystical.
Yes. Yeah.
And I recognize it in my Hindu friends, but they're not that way just because they're in that religion. That religion is not necessarily that way.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Elizabeth, you got to cut me off when you say it's time for me to go. It's 12:30.
Well, does anybody else have questions?
Katrina, I don't have a question. I just have a comment. And that is, in listening to everything, it made me think about why can a culture or some in a culture have an experience of something that the five senses can't see, but yet be so adamant about not exploring the reality of that. And what came to mind is that it seemed to me it's based upon fear, because I think if you challenge the core of what you promote, so in terms of a religion, then that means that you may end up having to challenge some other beliefs that you have, and so you just try to shy away from that so that you won't explore your other beliefs, because those beliefs you may find out that they're not true, and then you have to accept that truth. So I appreciate your sharing what you shared to bring me to that position. Thank you.
I'm a historian by vocation, and the history of the West teaches us that rational thought became supreme. And we know when it happened, about 1600s, 1700s. And I would propose that it had so many benefits. On the one hand, the easiest one to talk about is medical benefits. I know I would be dead 2 or 3 times if it hadn't been for that mindset, that rational is the way to go. And I expect half the people that are listening to me would have died if it hadn't been for modern medicine. So it had some benefits. Katrina is one thing I'm saying. But along with those benefits, it also granted power. It developed technology. And it developed technology that could be used in favor of white male dominance. Colonialism is a big expression of that. So that and colonialism, patriarchy, white male dominance, all those things are part to me of the same package of Western history. Allowed them to assume we have control and power over the future, over humanity, and by God, we are good. And I don't mean good at, I mean we are good. They need our ways, and our ways are scientific, technological, organized ways. That's the Enlightenment project. So we are just beginning to be able to step back and see the horrific side of that. And by the way, we're not past it. I don't know if y'all have noticed, but you live in a culture in which white males who are very rational and who don't want to use imagination, and they don't want religion that humbles people, are beginning to realize they can't keep that power. And they're not going down without a fight. So I view the question that Katrina asked as getting my best explanation over long-term control and power issues, which religion always has to fight against. Gandhi is humble. Jesus is humble. By the way, Muhammad, blessed be his name, is humble. But if you can ever get your hands on the levers of power, you may take your religion and use it to help you prop up being in control and being powerful. I think we live right in the middle of that. And I think genuine religious experience is always undermining that. It's often in a minority, but it's always saying, no, that's not where the universe is going to take us. You are not God, and you are not the final answer to human life and community.
In light of the last couple of comments, it seems to me that there's a distinction between religion and spirituality.
Yes.
Religion can be political,
Yes.
which is often used as, but spirituality is not. So
Right.
it would behoove us to make that distinction.
Right. And not to identify religious institutional ways with the spirituality which they are made to be doorways to. So that to me does not suggest then I should do away with the institutions, because spiritual experience without any institutional structures, can't be passed down. The good sides of it can't be passed down. The good stories, the good examples. We wouldn't know about Jesus without the institutions. We wouldn't know about other great figures in other great religions. We wouldn't know about the Buddha without Gautama, without institutions. So, but what we have to always be on guard against is identifying the structures with the essence. And the language I would have used, and I'm agreeing with you, is religion can be politicized. I'm getting political now, and you don't have to agree with me, and you can quickly disagree with me. But I think in America, the violence of January 6th was a politicization of Christianity, because a lot of evangelical white Christianity is mixed up in that event. I also think what's happening in Turkey, where dear friends of mine have gone to jail because they were university professors, is politicization of Islam. I also think in India, where there is persecution of Muslims and Christians, is a politicization of Hinduism. It's Hindu nationalism, it's Turkish nationalism with Islam, and it's Christian nationalism. And they are all politicized movements. And they have very little to do, Molly, I think you'll agree, with the essence of what those structures rose to provide.
All right, I have one last question, Dr. Allen.
Yes, honey.
Given this politicization, this is just a follow-up to Molly's question. How do churches walk the tightrope of conveying Jesus as a political revolutionary, as he was during his time period?
That again is something that there's been a lot of ink spilled on in the last 20 or 30 years. What was Jesus' primary identity? Was he a political revolutionary? Was he a religious figure? And I'm a layperson in these kind of terms, is not my area of expertise. I would say, well, he's primarily a person who has had the divine human encounter, and that has political repercussions. So he has to be political. But every person who's had divine human experience has to be political. Otherwise, you couldn't be true to the force of love that's trying to reshape all our societies. So how do we convey the people who've done it best, in my personal opinion and in my experience, are African-American Christians. The larger tradition of African-American Christianity has done the best job of saying, if you're going to follow this gospel, it's going to be revolutionary politically, but not because we control the political power. but because we are the conscience of the political powers. And that's Martin Luther King Jr. stuff. Here's an example that's given by the guy who runs Sojourners. He said there are two ways that religion can affect politics. He said one view is that we must elect people of our religion to have control over people who are not of our religion, because our religion is true, and if we get our leaders in, the government will be a good government. He said that always fails miserably, because governments tend to be self-sustaining, and they'll tend to push religious values under. He said the other way, and this is the Martin Luther King way, is every politician in a democracy, at least, has to hold their finger up and see which way the wind is blowing. And they've got to go with the way that wind is blowing if they stay in office, to do good or ill. They got to at least which way's the wind blowing in the larger society. And then he said, Christianity's job, he was a Christian, Christianity's job is change the way the wind's blowing. So if the wind is blowing towards the far right and control, we need to get out there and develop a more democratic people's voice that says, no, you're not in control. And most people not wanting that in control. So then when the politician, oh my gosh, the weather's changed, I've got to change my policies. He says that's how we got the civil rights movement. And he says it's how we'll change things now. That's a question of how is politics done from religion. So Sonny, back to your question of Jesus as a political revolutionary, according to the text, he didn't try to raise an army and have a revolution. He tried to change the way the wind blew so that governments would change. And by the way, they did. It takes a long time, but they did. Rome's view that the way you knew God was on your side was how many people you killed had changed within 300 years when Constantine became Christian. Then the priests wouldn't have services praising bloodthirstiness, but they would have services hoping, asking the emperor to use as little violence as possible. I've got examples of this if you take my church history class.
Thank you.
Yeah. Y'all go in peace to love and serve the power which is the divine and transcendent, which is new every morning, working for good in the world, and which you and I strive in every way that we know how to join and be a part of.
Lord, thank you for lifting us up with this message. This was absolutely timely, as someone else pointed out, and it was comprehensive in a way that will take some time for us to digest. And so thank you for reminding us of the power of transcendence. Thank you for reminding us of the power of love and changing the weather. Changing the weather. I really,
Lord knows it's stormy out there, isn't it, Jaco?
Oh, brother, it is. As in Star Wars talk, there's a great disturbance in the force.
In the force, yes, there it is.
And so, yes, it is up to us to do our best to calm the force, to be that which calms the force. So with that, we'll use our regular closing prayer, which asks for that. And it goes like this: let there be peace in outer space. Let there be peace in the sky, on the earth, and in the waters. Let there be peace in the herbs, the plants, and the trees. May the gods be peaceful. May the whole universe be pervaded by peace. Let that infinite universal peace prevail throughout my being. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto us, and to all beloved beings everywhere. And once again, so glad you were with us this morning. As you can see by the hour, there were a lot of people who wanted to stay and hear and discuss this with you. And that is always, for me, the measure of our success, is how much we're doing this together. So again, please look forward to another invitation from us in some months or whenever seems auspicious.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Lord.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
I'm going to end now. May we go in the mother loving and protective embrace. Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ji Ki Jai. Durga, Durga, Durga.